All right, in this video, we're going to talk about division. So you guys should already have an understanding of what division is, but I'm just going to go through that really quickly again. So if we have these 4 walruses and these 8 fish, okay, division basically asks how many fish does each walrus get? All right, so if we divide these, we'd give them out evenly. All right, so they first all get 1 fish, and then we'll give them each another fish. And we see that we don't have any fish left over, and they all have an equal amount. And so that means that we just divided 8 fish by 4 walruses and got 2. And 4 goes into 8 without any remainders, and so we can say that 8 is divisible by 4. All right. When we're doing division, this number is the dividend. 4, in this case, is the divisor, and 8 is the quotient. Okay, so the dividend is the number that we are dividing. The divisor is the number we're dividing by, and the quotient is the result. Okay, but now we have these same 4 walruses, but we have a few more fish here. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 fish. So we're going to do 10 fish divided amongst 4 walruses. So let's move these around here. We'll give 1 to each to start. We'll give another 1 to each. Okay, and we are left with 2 fish. So in this case, when we did 10 fish divided by 4 walruses, we got 2 with a remainder of 2, which means that we had 2 fish left over. Okay, and so in 6th grade, we're going to spend a tiny bit of time dealing with remainders, but then we're actually going to figure out how to change this remainder into a decimal, and that's going to come next week in our lesson. Okay, so we could actually, if we think about it, we could cut each of these fish in half and give a half of a fish to each of the walruses. And so our answer without a remainder is actually 2 1/2 or 2 5/10. So we're going to see this next week, and we're going to be dealing with remainders this week. In 6th grade, we really try to move away from remainders and go to this decimal format. But there are some instances where we're going to want to keep remainders. For example, if we were going somewhere with the whole 6th grade, and there are, let's say, 63 students in the 6th grade, and there's 2 buses that we're taking, 63 divided by 2, that's not going to go in without a remainder. We would have a remainder of 1. So it'd be 31 with a remainder of 1. Now we're not going to cut one of the kids in half, right? We can't do that. We can't have half a kid on one bus and half a kid on another bus. And so that would be an instance where we would use a remainder. However, if we're talking about money, okay, we don't need a remainder. We can use cents instead. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to change things with remainders into decimals next week. Okay, so let's talk about long division. Some of you guys may have been taught long division, some of you guys may have not. So we're going to look at the steps for long division. These first 2 problems are not going to have remainders. They're going to go in as whole numbers. So we have 216 divided by 4. So whenever we're doing a division problem, we want to put the dividend inside of our division symbol and the divisor on the outside. So I would read this as 216 divided by 4. Okay, so 216 divided by 4. So the very first step is to see how many times can 4 go into 2. So we want to divide 2 by 4. So 4 cannot go into 2 because with a whole number because 4 is greater than 2. So I'm going to put a 0 above that 2. Okay, so now I have to look at the first two numbers in my dividend. The 2 and the 1 together, they make 21. So how many times does 4 go into 21? Well, we know that 4 times 5 is 20, and so 4 goes into 21 5 times. So I'm going to write the 5 up here in my answer above the 1. We need to make sure we're lining things up. There was a 0 in this place, there's a 5 in this place. And now I do whatever 4 times 5 is and subtract it from 21. So I'm going to write 20 here with my subtraction symbol. 21 minus 20 is 1. Okay, so now I have this 1 down here, but I'm not done with the problem because I still have some numbers in my dividend to work with. So the very next step is to bring down this 6 into what was left over when I subtracted 21 minus 20. So now I have this 16 to deal with, and I'm going to ask myself how many times can 4 go into 16? Well, the answer to that is 4 times. And I know that 4 times 4 is 16, and so I'm going to subtract 16 from the number that I was dealing with here, and I get 0. Okay, now there's no more numbers for me to bring down, and I ended with a 0, which means that my answer is just 54. Now, to check this, I could do 54 times 4 to see if I get 216. So 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. So I get 216, which is exactly the answer that I was looking for. So my answer is correct. Okay, so let's look at the next problem. We have 5,064 divided by 12. So I'm going to identify my dividend. That's the number that I'm dividing. So 5,064 is my dividend, which means my divisor, the number that I am dividing by, is 12. Okay, so now I have a 2-digit number to deal with in my divisor, and that's okay. We'll make this work. So first step, I ask myself, how many times does 12 go into 5? Well, it doesn't go in a whole number of times. So I'm going to put a 0 above the 5. 12 does, however, go into 50, which is what I'm looking at as I look at the first two numbers in my dividend. Okay, so 12 goes into 50, and it goes in 4 times. So if you don't know what 12 times 4 is, you might need to do a little bit of math off on the side. But we should know that 12 times 4 is 48. And so that's what I'm going to subtract from my 50. And 50 minus 48 is 2. Okay? So if we remember from the last problem, the next step is to bring the next number in our dividend down to what is remaining from that subtraction problem. So now we have a 26 down here. So 12 goes into 26 2 times. And I'm going to multiply 2 times my divisor, 12, and I'm going to get 24. So that's what I'm going to subtract from 26. 26 minus 24 is 2. So if you've noticed, I'm not yet done with this problem because I have a number still to bring down, and I'm also dealing with, I don't have a 0 yet. Okay, so the biggest thing that keeps us going is the fact that I still have to bring down a number, still have a number in the dividend. So I'm going to bring that 4 down, and now I have to figure out how many times does 12 go into 24. 12 goes into 24 twice. And 12 times 24, or sorry, 12 times 2 is 24. And so when I subtract, I get a 0. And I now know that I'm done with the problem because there's nothing left to bring down in my dividend. And I know that there's no remainder, that this went in exactly because there is a 0 left over. Okay? And to double check this, I can quickly do 422 times 12. All right. And I get 5,064, which is what I got here, or what I started with as my dividend. And so my quotient times my divisor, in fact, equaled my dividend. Okay, so that's it without any remainders. The next slide, we're going to look at what happens if we do have a remainder. Okay, here we have an example, and we're going to end up with a remainder at the end. So I have 4,562 divided by 3. I'm going to write down my dividend, 4,562, and put it inside my division box with my divisor of 3 on the outside. So now I ask myself, how many times does 3 go into 4? And that's 1 time. I subtract 3 because that's 3 times 1. So 4 minus 3 is 1. I bring down the 5, and I have 15 here. So now how many times does 3 go into 15? 3 goes into 15 5 times. So I put a 5 up above the 5. 3 times 5 is 15, so I subtract 15. I put a 0 because 15 minus 15 is 0. And then I bring down the 6. 3 goes into 6 2 times. I put a 2 above the 6 and subtract 6 from 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. I have one more number to bring down, so I'm going to bring down the 2. 3 goes into 2 0 times. So I'm going to put a 0 above the 2. And I don't have anything else to bring down in my dividend, but I do have this leftover 2. And in this case, we're going to say that that is our remainder. So we have a remainder of 2. So our answer is 1,520, remainder 2. Okay? And again, next week we're going to see how do we change this into a decimal number instead of something with a remainder. But for right now, we're going to keep it as a remainder. So our answer is 1,520, remainder 2.